Welcome. Today we're going to be looking into the mind of an alienated child. We are going to talk to an adult child of alienation, and the guest I have with us today is Atem. Atem. I'm so sorry. I'm still learning how to pronounce his name. If you guys can hear me okay, please let me know. My name is Petra Dieter. I am also an adult child of alienation, and so together with Atem, we're going to share with you our experience. I want to make sure that you don't lose what we're talking about. So if there's any technical problem, please let me know. Also, I do wanted to let you know that if anyone at all in the world understands parental alienation, it's probably you, because you lived through this experience, and I'm talking about all of you in the audience as well as attend here. And so the problem with why this problem is so misunderstood is because there's a lack of awareness, and because of the lack of public awareness about this, that we don't get the recognition and the victims don't get the recognition and resources that is needed to solve this problem. And so I wanted to bring this kind of conversation to a wider audience. So in the chat room, I put a link there. Please help me by voting for me to bring this conversation to a wider audience, which is South by Southwest. So if you guys can help me by sharing on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, that link there. And if you can vote, it's pretty simple. It only takes a minute to vote. Today actually is the last day for you to vote for me. Is it today and tomorrow, the 20th? So tomorrow is the last day. So please help me. If you wanted this conversation to bring to a wider audience, please help me vote in that link. Okay, so Atem is an adult child alienation. I have no idea what his story is. So we are going to explore that together. We're going to discover that together and see what it looks like. And I will warn you guys that occasionally I have interviewed people who believe they are victims of alienation, sometimes who are parents, turn out to be the alienators inadvertently, and they themselves don't know that. And so like I said, I don't know what the story is, so we're all going to find out. This is not to deny your experience whatsoever. I'm just giving people a heads up. What I mean is there's no filter here, and we're just going to be as authentic and open as possible with this conversation. So Atem, let's just start from the beginning. Like, how old were you when this started?
You mean how old when I was alienated?
Yeah, when it started, yeah.
Oh, I cannot pinpoint when it happened. I think it was a general vibe. I think it started slowly, maybe when I was maybe 8 or 10, or maybe 5, I would say. But I couldn't see it because we used to be connected with we used to have a big family, a large family in France. And so there was, like, in a way, a sort of mitigation. But the time after time, we were, my sister and I, disconnected more and more. So the alienation started to manifest more. But I never knew that I was alienated until I reached the age of 45. So it's only
I'm sorry, who were you alienated from?
From my dad, from my father.
Alienated from your father. By
my mom.
By your mother. Okay, so your mother is an alienator and you were alienated from your father. I wanted to point out something that you brought up that was such an important point, which was, you said you couldn't figure out when it started. It seemed like a slow process. It seems like it started from even when you were 5 years old, but you didn't really see it until years later. And you never really recognize it until you're an adult. But, and this is something so important, is that I talk to a lot of alienated parents who would feel like it's something that happened overnight, and it's usually something like, oh, that day, I took the phone away from my child, and then he or she refused to come over, and I never see he or she again. So there's this misattribution of events. They would look at that particular event as if they are the cause, and that event is the cause of alienation. It's not. It's actually something that happens slowly over time that you sometimes look at it and doesn't know what you're looking at. You don't see it, so people just assume that that event is the thing. Or oh, she or he wanted McDonald's that day, and I refused to, do that, or I refused to allow her to go out with her boyfriend, or go out with their friend that night, or whatever. But it's not that particular event. It's this whole process that has been building up, and like you use the word mitigation, I guess. Yeah, it's a very common thing, and it's important for parents to recognize that it's not one thing that they do. It's this whole campaign behind the scenes that you may not recognize, and even the child doesn't recognize.
Definitely.
Yeah. So it seems to me that you have a sister, but yet your sister was not alienated, only you.
Oh no, I have two sisters, and they also have been alienated, and one of them is not realizing it. I realized it myself, and my other sister started to realize it like recently, the last 5 years, I would say.
Oh, I see. So all three of you got alienated from your dad.
Yes.
And one of you still haven't woken up yet, even though you guys are all in your adulthood.
Yeah, definitely. There's reason for that. But yeah, overall, we've been alienated. It's only later in life for several reasons. I started to discover when my dad passed away in 2002. And even after he passed away, I was so sure that he was the cause of all our problems in the family. I was so sure. So I was suffering alone his death because I loved him very much. And it's only, 10, 12 years later that I started to connect the dots, I would say. So I was, yeah.
I just realized that you never got a chance to reunite.
No. That's why your story resonates with me.
Tam and I had a brief conversation beforehand, like really brief, and he mentioned that he might get emotional because it's his first time sharing this story publicly. Yeah. And I said, I get emotional even though I've shared my story many times, and and I'm already tearing up because it's so devastating.
Yeah.
As adults to realize it, but it's too late.
Yes. Yeah. It's a big failure I felt for me, but no,
it's not you that failed.
Yeah.
No, it's not you that failed. This is the thing. Victims often who blame themselves while abusers and the rest of the system is responsible for sorry, I have some kind of echo issues. What's going on? I'm sorry. It's like my technical stuff. Yeah, victims will very often blame themselves, and society, is very much responsible for enabling the abuse. Never realizes they play a part in it, and that's just, unfortunate. So let me just fix this audio thing. 1 second. Okay, I don't know how. Never mind. Okay. So you said it started from maybe even when you were much younger, but maybe 5 or whatever. What kind of things that was going on that that was in that campaign that convert you into an alienated child?
Yeah, it was constant. I come from I would say a dysfunctional family. It felt like in hindsight that I was living in a sort of alcoholic family. There was like a high conflict. It was regular, and I didn't know at the time, but my mom was like in a way brainwashing us, my sister and I, because she was obviously not happy, but she was every day, triggering my dad, causing or yelling at him. She was distancing herself from him every day. I noticed that I don't remember, maybe after the age of 4 or 5, I never seen my parents expressing love between each other, and I never seen them hugging or kissing. And so I grew, imagining, because I believe we've been brainwashed by my mom, but it was brilliant. I think it was instinctive from my mom. I couldn't see it. I couldn't even feel it. It's like she used our imagination of a child to imagine that she was abused by my dad. My dad was very charismatic, very masculine and strong, and you can, based on the interpretation, see it as a threat or as a security, a secure figure. And my mom, by generating argument over time, I believe my sister and I, but at least I can speak for me, I felt like my mom was abused by my dad, that he probably hit her or something, but I'd never seen it. And she did a brilliant thing, and she was so manipulative. It's hard because I try to not to be fair and not depict her as a monster, because she was a good provider as well at the same time. And she created confusion in our perception as a child. And on one hand, she was not showing any affection or tactile love. And on the other hand, she was like unhappy in her relationship, and she was always triggering my dad, or, creating, blaming him for everything all the time. And she, and my sister and I, we've been exposed to violent moments where she pushed my dad, for so long to express his exasperation. But I never seen like violence or hitting her. I saw them yelling at each other, and it was quite traumatic enough. And so yeah, I think it was that kind of dynamic, and I couldn't understand. It was chaos all the time at home, but also it was chaos between my mom and her own family, her sisters, and I was too young to understand what was going on. But long story short, I believe my mom, my sister, and we used my dad, as a scapegoat for everything. So
everything was blamed on him. He
yes.
was the evil, he was the bad guy.
Yeah, and I had a good time with him, and I loved him, and it's almost like I was not allowed to love him in front of my mom. So
what did you think back then? What did you feel like could happen if you were showing love?
I think it was instinctive, almost animalistic. I felt like if I loved my dad or sided with him, I will lose my mother, or I will get punished. I will be punished. But it was my interpretation as a child. So,
right.
But yeah,
it's subtle, right? It's not because she didn't go out and say, "Don't you dare express your love for your dad. I will punish you." She didn't say it, but it's subtle. You understood it, right?
Yes, definitely. There was like it's strange, because it's only later in life that I discovered what kind of pathology she has. It's a combination of borderline, NPD, and maybe antisocial. What she did a brilliant system to preserve her world, of her perception of reality. It's like reality was a threat to her. So she created like a sort of imaginary world, and all of us, we submitted to it, and we knew there will be yelling and punishment, and if we decide to think for ourselves or stand up to protect our dad. And so, but my dad was not perfect. I think he was also dysfunctional as well. But I believe the person who has been abused was my dad now, and yeah, she created like a system where we all had to walk on eggshells, And not only she manipulated all of us, but she also manipulated between my sister and I. She was like also creating a drama and manipulating me against my sister, or whatever was the need of the moment. She would create division.
So yeah, so that's called triangulation, right? Which is creating conflict between other people so that you can be at a higher power. You're in the position of power if you create conflict between other people because they then need you, and you become the more superior in a way. That's pretty common narcissistic behavior, and it's
Yeah.
called triangulation. Okay, so they, even though they had so much problem, your dad and your mother, um, they still stay together.
Yes, I believe it's because I come from a Muslim family, from a Muslim culture. I was born in Tunisia, but my parents moved to Paris when I was 1. So in Islam, you don't divorce or separate. It's like a very, I mean, I don't know how it is today, but it was impossible for them to divorce. My dad, I don't think wanted to separate because he had a previous relationship and had children from another relationship. So I think he didn't want to fail again, I guess. So there was like a dynamic where I believe my mom felt oppressed, and she reacted with that kind of tsunami of dysfunction. And when they couldn't separate because back in the days in the family, it was not well seen to do that. So, but at the end, she finally divorced him in 2000. Yeah, she did it was kind of, again, brilliant from her part, because she presented herself as a victim, that she was abused by my dad for so long that they separated. They were still living under the same roof the last 5-8 years of their relationship before they divorced in 2000, I believe. And it's
So this is when you're already an adult and already out of the house and everything.
Yes. And the sad thing, I truly believe that my dad loved my mom, and 1 year after the divorce, he passed away. I don't think he succeeded to. I mean, there's multiple reasons why he passed away, but one of them, I believe, is the divorce.
Wow. So the alienation, this is one of the situations where alienation is happening inside the relationship when the two parents still stay together.
Yes.
And it's uncommon, but at the same time is actually true for all relationships, or almost all the relationships, which is people think that alienation happened after the divorce or separation, but actually it started way before that, and it makes look like an innocent form of parenting. People don't realize that it's actually alienation happened way before, and when they were still together. So it's quite common. But with your situation, it happened the whole time they were together.
Exactly, and there was like this weird dynamic. It's almost like I felt like my parents were like children in a body of adults. There was a huge a huge level of emotional immaturity, and so when my dad tried to stood up as a authoritative figure, my mom would attack him, pretending that she was abused, and there was no way to succeed this relationship, and the dynamic was completely immature and dysfunctional, and nobody could, neither my mom or my dad, stand and say, let's be adult and figure this thing out. And so the few time my dad tried, and he was depicted as abusive, and and you know.
Yeah, that's one of the alienating behavior, which is undermine the authority, undermine the parenting role and power of the alienated or the target parent, which is a
Yeah,
common alienating behavior.
correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like the parent would try to, the alienated parent would try to, let's say, be the proper parent and say something, and the alienator would undermine that by saying, you don't have to listen to him or her or something like that.
yeah.
Um,
It's just, and what they did, I think both of them are complicit of that, is they allowed my sister and I at an early age to see their dysfunction and their rage and their frequent disagreement, and it was very traumatic, and it damaged my sister and I in a different way. Me and one of my sister kind of became, we grew like codependent, people pleaser, kind of nice, submissive way. And one of my sister became NPD and histrionic, and it was horrific. I would say now in hindsight, and I think my mom didn't have any maturity or empathy to. It's almost like she cared only for her to survive, whatever it was. It was her only goal. We were, as a children, we felt like we were like kind of not loved, but like as an extension of her. So, and I believe for her, she believed she loved us, but I felt like we were like a part of a family fresque or part of her, and it
so
was
what
very
kind
hard.
of things did she do or say that make you feel that way? Like, do you remember any particular incident or?
Oh, so, a lot, a lot. She used, for example, the Muslim culture as a foundation of her dysfunction. She would always say, "You don't talk to me like that. You don't do this because you do blah blah." And she was using all the traditional values to justify her behavior. So we couldn't express, we couldn't exist because we were like caught between the tradition and her authority. There was no way to exist and have like and develop some critical thinking and be she and she I, I think because she's NPD or BPD at the same time, but she was very brilliant to create situations that will always fall back into the responsibility of my dad. My dad was not the perfect dad. He had like his dysfunction, but I remember situation that very, very traumatic. Like I remember clearly the day I was probably 10, 11, and he brought one day, he wanted to please my sister and me, and he brought a puppy one day. And to have a puppy at home. And my sister and I were so happy and joyful. And I heard like 10, 15 minutes later, my mom yelling. It almost like looked like an exorcism. It was so violent. And she said to my dad, and she humiliated him. She said, "I don't want an animal here. We cannot take care of it. I want you to get rid of it tomorrow." And my dad was not particularly emotionally smart. So the next day in the morning, he took us, my sister and I, to school, and we had the puppy with us. And as we were driving on our way to school, I didn't know what would happen for I thought we would keep the puppy forever. And he stopped on the street and he said to me, "Open the door and let go the puppy." So he forced me to take the puppy and abandon the puppy on the sidewalk, and he closed and I had to close the door, and we left, and I saw the puppy and it's only, I don't know, 20 years later that I realized that I remember I think my sister and I, we feared that the next one to be abandoned will be us. So we had to really to behave, otherwise we'll be like abandoned like the puppy, and it was horrific, and it was quite extreme, and I have like some other example of this kind of craziness. So,
Oh my God, that is such a traumatic
yeah,
experience.
there are no level of finesse or empathy or.
So I assume that you blame your dad for that
Oh yeah,
incident.
of course, he was the evil. He was a perfect scapegoat because he was strong. He was masculine. Any energy of authority was seen as a threat or abuse. So it was
And I
perfect.
see Antonina's question in the chat room is a brilliant question, and we'll definitely go into that in a little bit. And parents, if you have questions, please feel free to put in the chat, and we're going to try to pick up as many as we can. But that is such a horrific experience as a child.
Yeah.
To be given a puppy and then had to abandon it in such a devastating way. And like you said, clearly this is really poorly handled by both of your parents.
Yeah.
Your dad too. And I get it that your mother put him in a situation where he had to let go.
Yeah.
But to put it on you.
Both of them were dysfunctional. Yeah. Both of them were dysfunctional, and I don't know if it was voluntary. They were creating chaos and system of abuse that will terrify us, and forced us to be loyal to our mom, because ultimately she was the one who had like all the power.
Right. And I agree with Mariska in the chat room. She said there's no excuse for abandoning a puppy in front of the children. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a TV show in the US, right, called Friends, and very popular, obviously. And there's one of the episodes where they talk about how, one of the parents would lie to the children and say, oh, we had to send the dog or the puppy to this farm. It's beautiful, huge pastures and green, and the puppy get to play all day with all their friends and all that kind of thing. That's the kind of things that parents do to help children cope with loss. That's healthy parents. But in this case, clearly, both your parents, both your mother and your father, like you said, were broken. And even though your father probably felt like he had no choice, he handled that really poorly. And your mother definitely also is it's such an abusive behavior. And clearly it's so dysfunctional, like you said, because for him to act without talking to her, bringing the puppy into the household, I mean, that's a big deal. To not talking to her, that just show you how broken that relationship is.
Yeah, it was awful. Yeah, definitely. Both of them are, were not brilliant and very dysfunctional. The lack of empathy was insane, and it's very paradoxical because my mom and my dad pushed my sister and I to really do well at school and to work hard and really. It was weird. I think on one hand they were quite smart. But at the same time at home they didn't want us to be smart. They really wanted to be naive and accept the abuse and not even critique anything.
Right. So people are measuring life and success very superficially by the school grades, by degrees, and they don't care about how you are as a human being and how you heal and how you cope. I see a comment there where a parent said, my ex took our son to abandon our dog. This will impact him for the rest of his life. Zero empathy. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just hear a Tan's story here about that. I mean, that's devastating. That's just, yeah, for sure. So you mentioned that you also have many other stories. Like, can you share maybe one or two other?
Or one is very hardcore. I don't know if I can do it today. I need to process it, but it's it's fascinating because yeah, I had like stories because when I reached the age of around 45, I started to kind of put all my effort, my intellect into understanding everything. I have like a, but so now I understand why my parents were behaving like that when you study the usual cluster B personality disorder and stuff. But for example, my mom was very, in a way, castrating. She was very like, she didn't want me to be a man. She wanted to be a boy and stay a boy. And so I think as an instinct, she wanted to make sure that I was not too connected to my dad because I may become one day a man. And, when you become a man, you're not like the boy of your mom. So she, in a very covert way, told me, before you get interested about girls and everything, you should study first. And you would think about, she was literally telling me to not have a girlfriend or anything of that kind. And so I was so upset. So I was one day, I don't know what age I was, like 14, 15. And I met that girl somewhere and I succeeded to get her number. And I told her to call me at home. And I wanted her to hear my mom. So that day when she was supposed to call, I left the house to make sure that my mom, it was a little act of rebellion, but it was very sad. But I'm trying to find like more like some story of abuse. I was like, overall, I was punished by my dad physically. So, and my mom was abusing me psychologically. So it was there was no way to exist. And if I was doing something wrong with my dad, I will get physically punished. I didn't know if it was him who wanted to punish me or if it was my mom who wanted him to punish me. And but I remember it's very hard to recollect all those moments. But for example, I was at 17. I did a big mistake, and I was like, I tried to find my way to exist in this life, and I couldn't find my way at home. So all my life, my development was always outside home. And when I was 17, I did like something terrible because I stole something at the store. I was like something I didn't need to I stole it, and I got caught by the cops. And I was because I was a minor. There was like at the police office facility, they told me they're gonna have to call my parents. I said, no, don't call my parents. Take me to jail or something. I didn't want to, and they had to. And they called my parents, and my parents came. So I was like so scared. And when I came home, my dad beat me and punched me. But it was like cycle of physical abuse and psychological abuse. But
so it seems to me that what you were describing with your mother is that there's this pathogenic enmeshment. She wanted to create this attachment between her and you that is so that you are codependent on her. So you can't mature and develop healthily as a human being. And she wanted you to be always dependent on you. But at the same time, your father is also abusive.
Yeah.
So really, you're an abused child. And I think there's an element of alienation there, but there's also abuse from your father. The thing with alienation is you can't truly call it alienation if that parent is abusive. So your father, yeah, go ahead.
It was, you're totally right, but something was strange because when my dad was punishing me physically, it was kind of weird. Sometimes I would run around the table. There was, it was abusive, but so we had like, I remember we had moments, I mean, I needed the relationship with my dad, and she, how can I say, my dad became more and more abusive because my mom was constantly projecting, and it became what my mom kept saying. So things became worse and worse and worse because I don't want to defend my dad or my mom, but it was such a dysfunctional dynamic that my dad became what my mom was projecting on him more and more. If you treat someone badly every day, it becomes that person, or that, and it's only when I was we had like a lot of great moments with my dad, and when I was 18, I told him, Dad, you're never gonna touch me, and we had a conversation between kind of adults. And he apologized, and he said he explained me that he was raised like that. That's why, and he said he would never do it again. But the alienation was so developed that when I was 18, I rejected him. I said, I don't want to see you anymore, and I was shooting myself in the foot because it created a sort of an immaturity in me, thinking I can succeed my life if I'm the opposite of my dad. So I rejected the baby and the bathwater, and I grew thinking I just have to be nice, and everything's going to be all right, and didn't, of course.
So I wanted to go back to the incident that you mentioned about you stole something from the store and you got caught. So it seemed to me you said that you stole something that you didn't need. So it's actually an act of rebellion, right?
Yes, I was trying to rebel in a different ways.
You wanted to express yourself. I'm tough. I'm cool.
I wanted, yeah, I was. In fact, I realized that actually my family became my friends outside of home. So all my moment of development and existence were with my friend or at school. It was very paradoxal. I had like I was fortunate to I met great friends and people when I was a kid, and I grew, and they are still friends today, and it created like an environment where I guess I try to have like some memories, and I guess I wanted to get caught by my parents. I wanted to just like rock the boat, and I don't know. I tried what I could. But,
right. Because there's a question in the chat room about, like how did this upbringing affect you as an adult? And we already started seeing things that you talk about. For example, you become rebellious and you didn't know how to prove yourself, but you wanted so bad to have your own identity. You wanted so bad to be different than this monster that you grew up with. So you were willing to do whatever it takes. And you also seek because you needed love. You needed to feel like you have a family. So you reach out and build relationship with strangers, and that's fine if you can have healthy relationship with other people. But we also have the situation here where you said that you also become people pleaser, meaning that you don't know how to set boundaries, so you let other people take advantage of you, and you're not standing up for yourself. You don't get to truly be yourself.
mm-hmm.
I'm assuming here. So yeah. Please tell me how does the upbringing affect you?
Oh, it was horrible. Not horrible, but I cannot explain it. But since I was a little boy, my best friend and my best relationship was God. So I speaking to him, and so I had like a kind of particular sensitivity. So I grew. I don't know what happened. I succeed to protect that sensitive part, and I remember when I was 8, I said, "My God, God made a mistake. He brought me into the wrong family. And so, but the lack of wisdom made me, and the dysfunctional family made me so to not be able to set boundaries. I associated, like, if I try to have some kind of decision making or authority or set boundaries, it would mean that I'm abusive, and so I grew trying to being nice naturally, and just wanting to chill, and the first thing that happened to me is I attracted someone who is very similar to my mom. So it's almost like, and it's all the things that I'm sharing also is a result of many years of me introspecting, studying, and therapy. It's not only I was attracting the wrong person, but I could only see the person who are similar to my mom because it was what was normal for me. And so,
Right.
and it's, yeah.
Right,
So
right.
it's fascinating because my ex-wife has like certain sign with different degree as my mom, but mainly a BPD, and to a lesser degree NPD. So I couldn't see that she was identical to my mom. And after my divorce, I was so devastated that I jumped into a relationship with someone who is histrionic. And it's fascinating because there was a person who is histrionic in my family is one of my sister. So it took me when I started to see that there was a pattern. I decided to take measures and do something.
Yeah. So you're talking about you end up with a partner in your life that is just like your abuser. And actually, there's a question earlier about whether you seek therapy. Obviously, you did seek therapy, and a lot of therapy for you to be able to get to this point in your life, to recognize and to wake up to these abuse. But I wanted to go back to that point about how you end up attracting someone that looked just like your abuser without you knowing that you really attracted to someone that's just like your mother. This is because grew up um, you grew up looking up to your mother as your primary caregiver, and that's the only thing that you've seen as your example of love. You don't know what love looks like. You don't know what unconditional love looks like. You don't know what true love looks like. You got used to this and you see abuse as loved. You get confused. And so you seek the familiarity. And it's not just you, I'm talking about in general, all abused children that grow up actually do this. And this is actually a very common impact on alienated children is that we grow up ending up in cycle of abusive relationships because we don't know what love should look like, and we don't know how to set boundaries. Just like you, I end up in cycles of abusive relationships. And when you're inside of it, it's very hard for you to recognize that. You have to be outside of it to see it. But you're in the middle of it, it's very hard for you to recognize, unfortunately. So that's why, and that's a very common.
It's fascinating because I would rather fight people, men on the street at night, than deal with setting boundaries. I mean, I changed, but it was extremely difficult for me to set boundaries. I was like afraid of conflict, and I didn't want any drama in my life. So and it's funny because I was I believe, yeah, I did everything I could in my relationship to be nice, to be a great provider and everything. And then at some point I realized that even if I did everything that I thought were right compared to my dad, and I'm still failing. And then I started to connect the dots and see the much bigger picture.
Because you felt like you were never good enough.
Yeah, and whatever you do with dysfunctional people, it will never work. And it's only recently, like I read that it's very extremely rare that a relationship with BPD work. I don't think, I don't see, I couldn't find an example of a successful relationship with someone who has PPD.
Yeah. Okay, so I still wanted to continue to explore this question about, and I see a comment in the chat room about no excuses for abusive behavior, and how your father sounds like this person, ex-partner, because all the physical abuse was blamed on the other parent. And yeah, so there's a question about I'm an alienated parent, and my fear is how it's going to be affecting my children in the future. And so yeah, there's a lot of things, and we actually go into this in a lot of our events in the past that breaks this down. Its impact, as we can see here with Tim, it impacted his sense of self-esteem, because he felt like he was never good enough. It impacts his development because he didn't know how to develop healthily. All he knew is I didn't want to be this, so he swing all the way the other way. Just essentially just completely conflict avoidance and trying to please people, and doesn't know how to set boundaries and letting people take advantage of him while he's feeling this sense of low self-esteem. And the thing is, when you're constantly doing this, any trigger happen, you're going to end up swinging completely to the other side. So there will be like, people will go, oh, you are so nice and sweet all the time. And then when they say something that really trigger you, you could turn really, really violent in that instant for just one. It may happen just once, but it could be so extreme because you've been swinging, holding this so much of this built up resentment and energy inside you that you could completely swing to the other side. I don't know if that ever happened to you, but I'm just talking in general. But does that kind of impact?
I think it's interesting what you're saying. Is that I noticed from people dysfunctional in my family, or after what I read, it's almost like there's such an emotional immaturity that there is only a joy and anger. Anything in between is like a source of shame, or so it looks like if someone is triggered and is BPD and PD, it would jump to anger and abuse directly, instead of going through gradual expression of just communicating to the other person, I'm disappointed, or I feel this and that. And so I don't understand what happened to me. I have like a strong emotional development. I'm not ashamed about my emotion, but I attracted people who were very narrow in their emotional. So I don't know. I think it's me who attracted people who have such an emotional immaturity, and I thought like it was my role to save them, or to connect with them, or to do the work. And it's only recently that I realized that you cannot save anyone. You can just love them, or.
Yeah. So you might end up staying in abusive relationship a lot longer than you should, because you felt like it's your job to fix, and you felt like if I'm the responsible person, I should work harder, I should fight longer for this thing.
Yeah, or I even felt like it was my role to endure that. But I tried to break up twice with my ex-wife because I was rational, so intellectual and cerebral. I really felt like it would. So the first time I wanted to break up, so I shared that with my sister and my mom, because I didn't know my mom was dysfunctional at the time. And it's funny how my mom was very dysfunctional. They protected my ex. It's almost like a team of dysfunctional people recognizing each other. And when I say I'm gonna break up, and they say no, you shouldn't do it. So it's so weird. And the second time, but unfortunately, we had our son. I wanted to break up because she was so abusive, and I couldn't do it. I said I stayed for my son, and I hoped that I could provide a family for him. It was another manifestation of the nice guy syndrome I had.
And then the other things that I wanted to point out that relating to the question about how does it impact alienated children as adults is that these children, because you grew up constantly, like your adrenaline is always on because you're constantly in conflict and in the fight and flight mode. You're constantly like in this mode. You became dysregulated, which is like normally you should be able to come down and calm down, but because you're always tense, your body get used to it. You're constantly tense, and you become what they call dysregulation, and that in itself is going to manifest in a way that not allowing you to cope with many other things in your life, but that psychological impact is actually has been proven to manifest into physical health conditions that sometimes you may not recognize, but it has proven to manifest in other people, where it could create health heart issues, immune system, lower your immune system, and many other things. So it's really the impact is really long term, and it's very devastating. I do see a comment in the chat room by someone that said, Snyder said, parental alienation is not a legitimate diagnosis. Now, I'm very tired of people that denying our experience, because let me tell you, Atan and me, we were the children. We have no stake in the game. We're not here to try to raise our parents' child support payment or get even with our exes. We have no motive in this. We were the children. We were the abused children. And this is our lived experience. And for you to say that this is not legitimate, please go away. Please go away. I had enough.
I understand, because I think people have a tendency, because for whatever reason, to see things almost like a movie. So if they see two dysfunctional parents, it's all like the same bag. But I can assure you, even if my parents like beat me to punish me, it was not enjoying. It was not like it was like a slapping or doing things, but he was abuse. I know it's weird to say, because he was abusive and in her own way. But my mom did such a good job to activate and he was abused, and I know that it was possible for me to have a decent and normal relationship with him, and I was not allowed to have it. But what's fascinating, because parental alienation, I think I also describe a set of situation, is what I noticed is my dad was a perfect scapegoat because of his dysfunction. He was the complexity of the situation was unbearable for all of us, my sister and I. So my mom used him as a scapegoat, my sister and me, and it was very convenient for all of us. Because how would you? Because it was impossible to imagine to have like a family reunion and start. So simplify everything. That's why emotional immaturity get transferred by using a scapegoat. It's simple like that. If you talk to your normal friend, you can say, oh, it was because my dad was and what happened, it's until the age of 45, I think my sister and I, we were kind of not humane. We were very we treated him like a subhuman in a way, and I'm just saying the parental alienation is it's so horrific because it damages the children in a way. It allows them to be in a way temporarily monsters without empathy, by just saying, okay, but he's still a human, you don't and it doesn't give the right it's not like I totally regret what I did to my dad, and because the psychological abuse that my mom did, it's such such magnitude that I accepted to treat my dad like in a very very bad way, and I cannot say he was a great dad, but I think one of the parents forcing the children to become like them, with empathy and finding an excuse. And I just regret that that I used him as a scapegoat for everything.
Right. So your dad was not perfect. He's not innocent, completely innocent. But even if he was a perfect father, he had no chance because your mother
No way.
was manipulative and brainwashing you, and really was able to control you in a way that there's no chance for you to have a relationship with your dad, even if he was a perfect saint.
Exactly. And when my dad was abusive, it was always when my mom was there. But when I was alone with my dad, it's almost like he was doing it to prove something for her. It's so weird. So I think I gave up trying to understand what happened between them.
Here's the thing for alienated parents to remember is that your children have been manipulated to behave in ways that is very cruel to you. The children could be very cold and rude and completely cruel to you. But if you don't recognize that your children are the product of the alienators, the brainwashing, the manipulation, this whole campaign of alienation. So what you are seeing is the result of this campaign of manipulation. It's not your children that's speaking to you. It's not your children that's rejecting you. It's this whole campaign that resulted in this behavior, and your children are just victims. And so if parents react to the child's behavior, so the parents somehow, get angry and, abusive to the children, like if you react and screaming and maybe even hitting the child or whatever, all you are doing is you helping the alienator because you confirm that you are, in fact, an unsafe parent, that you are emotionally unstable, that you are not a safe parent. So it's so important for you to figure out how to heal, how to mature emotionally, and to regulate your emotions so that you can stay calm and be the safe parents no matter what. And that is so important. And what you are going through is really tough as alienated parents. But if you don't reach to the point, and take this as a journey of improvement and self-discovery and maturity, because if you don't get to a point where you are healed and be there as a loving, safe, and available parent for your children, it's very devastating for your children because they have nowhere to go. Because the children rejected you, and if you accept that and walk away, the children lost you. But then the children end up with this abusive parent who, guess what, is not going to be there for your children. Even if they might be there physically, right there, but emotionally they are not there for the children. The case with Atem is that his mother doesn't want him to grow up, but doesn't allow him to be him at all. She's trying to control every aspect of his life and doesn't allow him to be who he is. So really emotionally, she was not there for him. And this is why he was seeking love and validation from other places outside the family, from strangers. And it's so important. If you can just stay there for your children, no matter what, it's so important. Your children really need that. Sorry, go ahead.
And also there's many side effects from parental alienation that we maybe don't realize. It kind of trains the children to accept that kind of behavior from the alienating parent. And worst, I think it trains them to become enablers. They kind of become because the only thing they recognize is that dysfunctional parent, and they know how to please that parent. So they grow up by not only being afraid of conflict and setting boundaries, but also to enable their behavior.
Right, of course, because you felt like it's okay for you to disrespect your dad. It's okay for you to treat your dad like he's not worth anything, and that you're allowed, even though you're a child, to be disrespectful, and you're allowed to be, and many children are encouraged, like alienated children are encouraged to spy on the other parent and even triggered to be violent to the other parent. And this behavior, like if you have a good parent, seeing the child behave this way against the other parent, they would speak up and say, and even when they're not together, they could still say, hey, you don't get to be disrespectful to your mom. You don't get to be disrespectful to your dad. Hey, that's not good. Because if you truly care about the child, then you should just go and take care of that child, make sure that child learns what respect is and what, human humility and behavior should be. But no, because they care so much about revenge against the other parent, so when the child is really rude and defiant and rejecting their parent, they actually encourage the child and make the child feel like, oh, yeah, good job, good job. And sometimes we interview children that they said, my other parent actually said, wow, you're such a grown adult. To make the child feel like, oh, that's the mature thing to do, to reject the other parent. And so, yeah, it's not a healthy thing, unfortunately.
Yep.
You said that you realized this when you were in your 40s. Now, what happened? What made you become aware of this?
It's super strange. I used to be proud of my mom because she worked hard and everything. So not only I disrespected my dad and I had the reason for that, and he was a scapegoat. At the same time, there was like sort of reassurance that the alienating parent is a good parent. So I thought I was proud, and I moved in 2001 to LA, and in 2002 my dad passed away, and it's so horrific because I loved my dad very much, and I needed him more than he needed me. And for many years, it took me 3 years to grieve, where I was crying in my shower, but I couldn't share. And my relationship at the time with my ex, I noticed like something weird. I started to see a sign of a lack of empathy. And for my ex, she gave me a hug as the day I received the announcement where I was crying. And it was nice and beautiful, but that's it. And then after, I never had like someone to reassure me or console me like you would have in a normal relationship. And then I grew, starting in my mind to collect some tips, some realization. And when I started to see my relationship, degrading, I started to realize it's crazy, because I started to recognize myself being mistreated the same way my dad was mistreated. And I noticed something. It's almost like I noticed that my mom, she did everything to trigger my dad to eventually be physical. I never seen any act of physical violence by my dad, but and in my relationship with my ex, there was a moment of conflict so high that I felt like she wanted me to be violent. I was conscious to see I'm not going to enter into that trap, and then I said, oh my God, I started to kind of connect with my dad. I said, even if my dad was 10 times better, there was no way that he could have succeeded. And so, and when the divorce happened, when I saw everything collapse, when I saw literally my ex changing, it's almost like I discovered another person, a new person, when the divorce process started. And then after that, I had like certain beginning of sign of alienation for my children, and and 5 years ago they decided to not see me anymore. So I started to connect and say, oh my God, it's like a repeat of my childhood, and I did everything I could to avoid that repeat.
Yeah, so really it's the intergenerational impact of alienation, that you grew up being alienated, and is the likelihood of you become an alienated parent is very high. And so that's what's going on.
Definitely.
And there's a reason for it. It's because you saw what it was and you got familiar with it. So you attract that kind of abusive person in your life who then does the same thing to you as what happened to your parents, and then you end up in the same place, unfortunately.
Exactly. And it's so painful, because those dysfunctional people, it seems that if you act a certain way, if you accept their abuse, I think you almost can have a decent time with them. It's like I have like a lot of great memory with my ex-wife of love, connection, and everything. But things over time didn't last. It's almost like I had like to spin the wheels even more and more and more. Nothing was enough, and yeah, it's. I think at the end of the day, I think it has to do with the kind of partner you choose, and also the emotional immaturity. For me, it's the big cause, because I don't know. I don't know what. It's only today that after all the work I did on myself, that I believe I can avoid it in the future. But
So you talk about how you felt like you had so many, incredible time with your ex, even though she turned out to be an alienator. Um, I think it had a lot to do with the dysregulation that we talked about earlier, which is when you grew up in this environment that's just very volatile, you got used to that and you then end up seeking that. So when you get into adulthood and into adult relationships, you're seeking this volatility and that like you can't settle down. So you need these extremes and you end up attracting someone that just always bring you this extreme. And people with personality disorder, because they need validation themselves, so they do a lot of things. And one of the things they do is called love bombing. Love bombing is when they really shower you with so much affection and they trying to look at whatever that you need and trying to go beyond that, but not unconditionally because they have a motive behind it. Sometimes they don't realize that that's what they're doing for, but it's not because they're genuinely loving you, but because they're seeking a payback or validation for themselves. So they're showering you with all these things and they projecting an image that is not truly who they are or their genuine feeling. So that's why you get these highs that are so high, and then you get into these abusive situations that are so low, and you end up with this relationship that's just full of ups and downs.
exactly. It's like you are being trained or programmed to. So if you do the right thing, if you bring the right nuts at the right place, you get like a reward. It's so weird, because at the beginning of the relationship, I realized that there was a sort of fascination between her and me. She was fascinating to me. I realized that there was like 3 stages in the relationship. At the beginning, it was a kind of love bombing connection. Everything is nice. I even felt sometimes that I was like the father, and she was a child. Like there is like a weird dynamic. And then after you have like an in between part where you have like a sort of you have to understand their what they need in advance, and you have to give it. It's like a setup to fail, and psychologically, it's very damaging, because it's the connection that was based on love, what you thought, become a connection based on trauma bond, and then you enter the last stage, which is where you are like the opposite of good, and whatever you do is not enough, and then the discard happen, and it's horrific. So, and it's what happened to me.
I saw a comment in the chat room where the person said, "Children learn what they live." My non-alienated child, adult child, told me that he thought that all of the fathers was like his dad, which was actually extremely verbally and physically abusive. And then that became the norm for him. And so my alienated children accept that the abuse is normal. And yeah, unfortunately, that is very true. For me personally, I grew up where my alienator, because I no longer had relationship or contact with my alienated parents. I lived with my alienator full time, who was extremely physically and verbally abusive, nonstop, every day. That I grew up really thinking that that's how a normal household is. I couldn't, like, if someone told me that their household was quiet and peaceful, that people just talk when they have conflict. And I couldn't imagine that. I never believed that. And then I end up in cycles of abusive relationship where it's full of volatility again. So I just thought that's normal. I honestly, in my 40s, assumed that that's normal. I didn't know until I ended up in a relationship that was very quiet, that I'm going, oh, people actually can have relationship where it doesn't just blow up into fire and explosions every day. I was truly shocked, and it took me quite a while for me to go, oh, that was really not healthy. All this volatility is so unhealthy. And imagine the kind of trauma it does to you, not just psychologically, but physically. Growing up and living a life that's just full of volatility and instability. And like you said, thinking that, oh, any moment you could be abandoned, just like the puppy. You could just be,
yeah,
growing up with that kind of fear and constantly, the term that you use was walking on the eggshell. How can you be fully a child and enjoying your childhood and be able to develop healthily if you every moment you're walking on eggshell thinking, how do I need to behave so that I can still be taken care of, so that I don't go starve and homeless and end up on the street?
yeah. And that's sad because I rejected my dad when I was 19, and at 21, he tried to reach out. He wanted to talk to me, and I couldn't see him. I was on the street. He tried to explain things I couldn't understand. I couldn't, and I saw him how the alienation was damaging him. He was like looking more and more like a homeless, and I have so many regrets because I know that that he did what he could. He was not a great father, but I felt like I became a monster, like my mom, to ignore, to reject, to to give the silence treatment. So, and it's almost like I had like my empathy for him shut down for like 10 years. And then I realized, oh my God, and he's a human, or at least he's like, I've, and so I just regret that how I treated him. It's something it's very hard for me to accept. So
Now you carry this guilt.
I'm sorry.
Now you carry a guilt.
So it's a guilt like forever. I think the way he passed away and everything, and it's. I think he tried what he could in the relationship, but yeah, it's and but I guess it was maybe the whole situation was an opportunity for me to do a certain kind of work to eventually break the cycle of intergenerational trauma.
Mariska said that the silent treatment is one of the most damaging forms of abuse. Yeah, because you shut down and you choose to not communicate.
Exactly. Yeah.
You kill the relationship. Yeah. I wonder though. So this is all hypothetical, obviously, but was there something that your dad could have said to you? Because you said he reached out when you were 21 and you shut him down. Was there something that he could have said, or the way that he would have said, or is there anything that he could have done or say that could have made you recognize it sooner?
It's very hard to answer because my mom took all the space, physically, mentally. She was everywhere, and so I think what could have been possible if my dad would have taken me every 3 months or 6 months to be with him, like one or 2 days, just to be alone with him. She was always in the picture. She was annoying all the time, and we couldn't build the connection and the relationship we needed. So I think it's a physical presence just for 24 hours or 48 hours, just to create memories instead of being caught into the whole drama. So
yeah, and so you point out a very important point there, which is while the alienators still have a complete control of the child, it's very difficult to break the child away from that bonded trauma
it's very similar to the Stockholm syndrome. You know, it's almost like your abuser. You better love the abuser. Also, you know.
Yes.
And,
Stockholm syndrome is when the victim becomes so attached to the abuser despite all the abuse. And that's exactly the situation. Is alienated children are abused by the alienators, but yet they are attached to the alienators.
Exactly. And the abuse sometimes is so strong from the alienator, and it creates a Stockholm syndrome. It's almost like in your brain, you think that the alienator has like a life or death decision. That person can give you life or remove it. It's a very I cannot explain it. I don't know if it's the children have a sort of extreme loyalty to that person, but usually they side with the parents that is they fear the most. So
it's also a very cultic kind of influence, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. And she literally created like an alternate reality at home, because when we were outside with family members and everything, I couldn't recognize them. They were like different people. And I think one of the things that saved me is I received some affection from my grandmother, from my mom's side. She was the one who I could hug her and everything. And there is like tiny elements in my life that helped me to survive and not be too broken up. So friends and some family members outside of the.
So I saw Ron asking how many alienated children have a wake-up call after target parent has passed away. It's very devastating, right, to recognize it, but it's too late. And that's what happened to Atem. That's what happened to me. By the time that I recognized it, my father had passed, and I had no way of reconnect with him physically. But he was a brilliant man who had figured out a way of leaving something behind for me that helped me connect with him. So I share my stories many times. So, if you have seen my other interviews like this, you probably have found it. But it's so important for you to, and actually we also have an event in the past where we talk about how to connect with your children beyond. And we're not talking about anything psychic or super natural or anything like that. We're talking about, so for example, in my father's situation, he left a website with his journal entries and photos and just so much for me to, and that really helped me heal, because truly as an alienated child who grew up as an adult and recognized it too late, you experience this just tremendous amount of guilt, which is what Atem was talking about too. And that's how I don't think I could have been able to be okay if I was not able to heal with what he left for me. I don't know how I would live with myself, because I was so rude and cold and completely defiant and completely rejecting him in a way that's just so cruel. But yet, despite what I did, he still loved me and he did everything he could, and he left something behind for me, which is that website that I found later when I searched for it, and his demonstration of his consistent love for all those years, despite everything. And the thing is, it's not just one letter, right? Because one letter you can write, but here you see journal entry, days and days and days. And he didn't write every day, but over the years it added up to be a lot. Then you can see that this is truly, this person genuinely care about you. This person truly loves you. And that matters so much because then there's nothing else that anybody can say that say he didn't care about me. Because all of these things that he wrote and how it was my school, like my first day of school, and he couldn't see me, but he still bought a backpack, a school backpack for me, and he knew that he would never be able to give it to me, but he bought it anyway. And just all these things that you just know. And my birthday, oh, he couldn't see me, but you know that it was my birthday. Like just like the consistency. So for parents to not give up, even if you don't have any contact with your children, that is so important. And yeah, it's very tragic for the children to wake up too late. Unfortunately, it does happen sometimes. But but please still be there for your children, even if you're no longer here.
Oh, yeah, I'm doing very similar to what your dad did. I journal. I sent probably thousands of email, more than thousands of emails and messages. I print them and I put them on notebooks. I'm thinking about writing a book to talk about my life and for them to have like, because what I crave the most when my dad passed away is to find a website or to find something like it was very, I would give anything to have like a picture. I will reach out to one of my uncles and see if I can get some picture. And but when I realized about the alienation, what's fascinating is I called my uncle in France and said, tell me, who was that? Was he a good person? Because my mom made everything to make sure that he will dysfunction and be the extreme of his dysfunction. And he said, yeah, your dad was good. And it was, and I know he was right because my dad was present at a certain particular moment of my life, and he succeeded to be present. And but now today, what I realized that to finish my perception, what I studied about parental alienation, but I realized that all those people who alienate usually have a dysfunction based on the cluster B personality disorders, and I believe borderline especially are based on the fear of abandonment. So when you have an alienated, it's not in the interest of the alienator that the children will have, because there's a risk that the children will have maybe a better relationship with the other parents, and then they will leave them. So the fear, they have an extreme fear to be abandoned. So they would rather sacrifice the relationship between the children and the other parents and being abandoned or risking to be abandoned.
Right, of course, because the child is totally vulnerable. The child needs a caretaker, and there's a survival thing because the child is being put in the middle of a loyalty conflict. If you're not loyal to the alienators, the child might be abandoned, and the alienated parent is being portrayed as unsafe and unloving. So even this little shred of insight that they might be loving and they might be safe is not enough, because it's this constant brainwashing that yeah, he or she is unsafe and unloving and don't want you. So to survive, the child has to be loyal to the alienator. And
correct, but also even from the alienator is terrified to be abandoned from the children.
Of course.
And
of course, yes.
So they know, I suspect that the alienator knows that if the children have a healthy relationship with the other parents, there's a risk that the child will enjoy better the other relationship. It's
yeah, they have their own unhealed childhood trauma.
Yeah.
So, right. So they have this pathogenic attachment to the children, and then they create all this problem.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's really tragic.
Thank you, Petra.
I do want to remind parents that on Wednesday this week, we're going to have an in-person meetup for alienated parents and adult children of alienation. You're all welcome to come. It's going to be in Toronto on Wednesday night. So please look at the events on our Victim to Hero Facebook page. If you are in Toronto, if you are near Toronto, I would love to meet you and see you in person. We're going to share stories. We're going to talk. So I'm looking forward to that. And we're going to try to do more in-person events. We don't do a lot of that, but we do that sometimes. So on Wednesday, please join us for an in-person event. Like I said, there's a comment in the chat room that I posted where I'm asking for your support by sharing that link and vote that link so that I can bring this kind of conversation to South by Southwest, which is a more general, bigger public audience rather than just our community of victims. We want the rest of the world to hear about this and to see about this. And then if you're not already join our mailing list, please join our mailing list on Victim to Hero website, the victimtohero.com website. If you go on the website, it's right there on the top, I think on the left or something like that, or the right, I'm not sure. Okay, and I see Ron said, I'm an alienated father who lost my children a year ago because the mother filed 6 back-to-back false child abuse allegations. My 11 years old son confided in me that he needed his mother's fake kisses instead of a stable future with me. False allegation, unfortunately, is a very common theme because when they try to do everything, they felt like all the brainwashing, all the manipulation is not enough. They felt like, yeah, this is like the silver bullet. If I can just say that the other parent is abusive to the child physically or sexually, in some way, society will respond to that, and sometimes the child even bought into that, and then that truly is the most effective way of alienating someone, unfortunately. And I'm truly, I feel so bad for all the parents that have to go through that, and it happened to all alienated parents at some degree. You're being portrayed as, neglectful, don't care about the children, don't love the children, to the extreme of, abusive to the children. And it's very hard and very tough to deal with. And I'm so sorry. Do you have any last words for other parents or other adult children out there?
The thing is, I truly believe, maybe it's my way to cope. I truly believe that what the horror went through have meaning. I don't think they are just like bad luck. I think I believe there's something at a family level and generational level that needs to be solved, and that mission happened to fall on our laps. So I think the parental alienation, besides the horror that we go through and that nobody can understand, I think behind there's something that needs to be done, not just for our children, but also for our ancestors and maybe our descendants. There is some, so I suspect there's something that different for each one of us that we need to understand and take that battle and do it. So I changed so much because of what I understood. So, but there's one thing that I totally underestimated. I couldn't, it's like almost like a circle in the parental alienation. They start with, chaos in the family, and then you have enmeshment, and I forgot. And but enmeshment for me is the most.
The violent will, the power,
yeah.
the will.
Yeah.
Of, yeah.
I think enmeshment is one of the most horrific aspects of parental alienation, because the children will completely embrace the perception of the parents. So if they don't have any extended family members, or they cannot, I think, break that enmeshment. So I suspect that at the root of parental alienation, there is that enmeshment with the dysfunctional parents, the alienating parents, and I don't know how you break that. I don't know how, unless my take is I forgot to add, like, the estrangement, because some parents think, you know what, I'm gonna let them grow and mature, but then there is a risk of estrangement if you don't reach out, even if it's one-sided communication. It's very important that even if it's a stupid card and think to because I hear a lot that give it time, especially from people also who don't have children, or give him like 1 year or two and they will understand and they will come back. I don't think that my dad didn't succeed to reach out to me, and I didn't hear from him for years. So at the end, I completely forgot that I had a dad, and so I would say, yeah,
And you see that he also abandoned you. You look at it that way.
yes,
You don't recognize that you're the one who abandoned him, and he felt like he had no choice, so he gave up. And it's so important for alienated parents to still be there, be present, be available, even if you can't reach the children. You still have to work hard to make sure that you show up, because showing up matters.
correct. And even if you feel like an obsessive, harassing parent, it's more important to continue to send those sign of love, a card, a letter, once a week or twice a week, or sometimes I have some moment where I send emails every day, and I always regret it, thinking it's very, but I'm trying to change that. But I think it's important to mitigate estrangement and enmeshment.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I saw Mariska said, oh, dysfunctional families need a therapeutic approach, for sure. And actually, when it comes to parental alienation, what has been found is that the family therapy approach is actually, yeah, definitely the most important one, the most effective one. So it's about looking at the whole family, not just like, oh, is this child broken? How do we fix this child?
Yeah.
Because this child is influenced by other people around, especially the alienators and the alienated parents and all that. So yes, we can't just isolate the child and say, oh, let's take the child aside and then let's just try to fix this child. It doesn't work that way. The child is within this whole family system. So the family system therapy is very important. We have another event coming up on the 28th. I believe it's at 10 a.m. Pacific time, where I'm going to be interviewing a family court judge who is very much familiar with parental alienation. So please join us. I know the event's not posted yet, but we're going to post that. We're going to do that event a little bit differently. We're going to do it as a Zoom call, so you guys can actually jump onto the Zoom call instead of a live broadcasting. So I'm looking forward to see you guys soon. And like I said, see you guys in person if you are going to be in Toronto on Wednesday. And stay wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.